Hi, Mike here. This video is about the unreliability and the assumptions of radiometric dating and the Darwinian control of all the accelerator mass spectrometer laboratories. In the world's leading secular scientific journal Nature, a paper by John Whitfield, who's a PhD in insect evolution, wrote an article, The Time Lords, and it was in Nature, volume 429, page 125, and that was written in 2004. Well, it reads this. To pin down the age of rocks, geologists rely on radiometric dating, which tracks the decay of elements within a sample. But in the past decade, it has become clear that the results from different techniques and different labs don't agree. Well, secular scientists base most of their research on the evolutionary, uniformitarian assumptions of the present is the key to the past. And most Darwinian evolutionary scientists, they actually ignore and they censor any inconsistencies in their research to fit the evolutionary paradigm. And then they carry on regardless. Just like they've carried on regardless in finding lots of soft biological tissue in lots of fossils right the way through the geological column. We'll talk about that later. Now, this is an example of the blatant deceit and censorship of scientists refusing to carbon-14 date dinosaur bones and biological soft tissue that cannot possibly be millions of years old. So I'm going to play this CNN 60-minute video report, and anyone can go to this. It's on YouTube, and it's from 2012.
What happened next happened by mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was, and it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No. She showed us videos she took under the microscope. That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old. So you see this, and you think, what? You
I didn't want to tell anybody.
that you'd be ridiculed,
Yes.
right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels. And, I was like shocked.
How could that be?
How could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones,
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seemed to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science, that organic material can't possibly survive even 1 million years, let alone 68 million. Mary, Jack, and their team published their B-Rex findings in a series of papers in the journal Science and were promptly attacked.
Now, in that video, you saw Jack Horner, who's a paleontologist, and he was overseeing Mary Schweitzer. Now, this next is a phone call between Bob Enyart from KLTT Radio to Jack Horner, and it's very, very interesting.
Our website is kgov.com. We will put the audio of my conversation with Jack Horner, the Jurassic Park movies technical advisor, on the end of this show so you can hear the hesitancy and why they don't want to test their soft tissue T-Rex find for carbon-14. Why not? Because they're going to find it.
Hello.
Hello, could I speak to Jack Horner?
Yeah, who's calling?
This is Bob Enyart with KLTT Radio in Denver, Colorado. That's Bob Enyart.
Yeah, let me transfer you over to his office. I think he should be in there right now.
Hello?
Hello, Jack. This is Bob Enyart with KLTT Radio in Denver.
Uh-huh.
How are you doing?
Good.
Jack, I sent a letter to Bob Harmon a few weeks back offering the museum a grant of $8,000 to do a carbon-14 date test of that soft tissue T-Rex you guys dug up. And he said he would forward that to you. And I'm wondering if you saw that or considered it.
Well, carbon-14 doesn't work on something that old.
I understand that, and normally we wouldn't expect to get soft tissue out of a T-Rex skeleton either, but sometimes science proceeds by crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and you guys might have other things you'd like to carbon-14 at the same time. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, I've been able to raise a little more money, so that's up to $10,000 now, that we'd be honored to give you guys if you would consider doing that test.
Well, we can't do that test.
You can't do that.
No.
Do you mean the museum doesn't have the laboratory?
We certainly don't.
Okay, well, we're happy to pay the expense of having a lab do the test in addition to the $10,000 to the museum.
Do you know how carbon-14 works?
Yeah, I'm familiar, and I realize it's useless for anything over maybe 50,000 years or so. But I've done a talk show in Denver for 15 years, and there's a group of folks interested in science. Of course, that discovery caught their attention, and they thought, well, it'd be logical to do this, to just go ahead and do it, even though nobody would be inclined to do it, just like nobody would be inclined to look for soft tissue inside of a T-Rex.
Well, yeah, and, we're still trying to figure out what it is, what it's actually made of.
Right, exactly, whether it's hemoglobin or whatever.
Well,
Jack, is the amount too small that it's just not worth the consideration?
No, that's not it.
Okay. What if I were able to raise more money?
No, the amount of money has nothing to do with it. Because carbon-14 doesn't work on something like this,
right?
Your results that you get could be all over the place.
Well, they should be infinity. It should be not datable. In other words, it shouldn't come back saying it's 25,000 years old.
Right.
It should be infinity. And so that'll be a worthwhile...
Well, infinity isn't exactly what you get.
Okay.
I mean, it's like trying to date a piece of concrete.
Right. You
wouldn't have to have carbon in it.
Right. You wouldn't use carbon-14. Now, the skeleton is not fossilized. Isn't that true, or largely not?
Well, it's the bone is made of calcium phosphate. Like I say, we're still trying to figure out what the actual soft tissue is.
Right. And see, we were hoping that a test like this would just add another bit of scientific information that you would have at your disposal. And also, in that grant letter, we asked if it could be a blind test with 5 different specimens, and therefore then the museum could test 4 other specimens that you might want to have carbon-14 dated, and so you could put it all in the same batch, and those testing then will pay the cost of that. That'll be free to the museum plus the $10,000 grant.
Let me tell you where I'm coming from here.
Sure.
All right. Obviously, your group is a group of creationists.
Yes.
And 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 the spin they can get off of it,
Right.
doing it, is
Well,
not going to help. Not going to help us.
Yeah. So even though it's just a scientific test, they're not asking for voodoo or anything.
It's not actually a scientific test. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Carbon-14 dating something with soft tissue in it. Jack, if I could raise $20,000, would it be worth?
I will talk to Mary Schweitzer about it.
Okay. I appreciate that. And how about this? I'll resend you the grant letter with the amount of $20,000 in it. And then you could talk to Mary and we'll see where it goes.
I want to know what group is sponsoring it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I mean I need some really specific details about.
Sure.
And don't just tell it to me straight.
Of course. I've hosted a daily talk show for 15 years. We're on a 50,000 watt AM station, KLTT. Mm-hmm. And there's a local church here, Denver Bible Church, that's offered to help. But we also have pledges from any number of individuals in the Denver community.
Okay.
So we could, if you guys agree, we could send you the check within 24 hours.
Okay. Well, let me talk to Mary, and let me just talk to a few people.
Okay.
Because I don't want to, I can't afford to have it turn into a circus.
Right. Well, I do understand that, and I appreciate your time. So,
okay. I will see Mary this next week.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'd be happy to call you back in 2 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Jack.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So to date, Jack Horner has not accepted Bob Enyart's offer to carbon-14 date the T-Rex fossil. So are the evolutionists running scared? Well, you be the judge. That phone call was from about 2013. So it, I think it's unbelievable that this is going on. So why do you think that Jack Horner and Mary Schweitzer did not want and still do not want to have their dinosaur bones and soft tissue carbon-14 dated? Well, the answer is simple. They did not want to lose their high-profile reputation as leading paleontologists. They did not want to lose their research funding. And they did not want to face the wrath of the evolutionary majority consensus, which unfortunately they have faced that wrath. They're being controlled by the Darwinian academia. It's very sad. This is Dr. Andrew Snelling, PhD, just talking a little bit about carbon-14 dating. And it's from Is Genesis History. It's well worth looking at.
I had no idea how many crystal shops were in Sedona.
No, and I'm glad you let me stop by because I wanted to get this piece of petrified wood. Arizona is famous for its petrified wood, and it's part of what we need to discuss here.
Well, when we were talking about isotopes, one of the things we didn't address was the whole area of carbon-14. I mean, most people are familiar, and yet I'm not sure we know exactly what that is. Can you describe that?
Well, first of all, we need to clear up a confusion. Most people think that radiocarbon is being used to date rocks. Whenever they think of radioactive dating, they think of radiocarbon because that's what they're used to hearing. But radiocarbon isn't used to date rocks because most rocks don't have carbon in them. And what we need is organic carbon because it's intrinsic to the methodology or how you understand how radiocarbon works.
How does a tree then get carbon-14 in it?
Well, it's simple because the radiocarbon is produced in the upper atmosphere. Cosmic rays bombarding the Earth's atmosphere turns nitrogen atoms into carbon-14 atoms, which circulates into the carbon dioxide that we breathe. Mm-hmm. And so it's also taken in by the plants during photosynthesis. So it's in the wood, it's in the leaves, it's in the vegetables we eat. Animals take it into their bodies, so it's in the animals that we eat. So it gets into our bodies. So not only are all these plants around us radioactive with radiocarbon, but we are ourselves.
So you have it, I have it.
Correct. And as long as we live, we're taking more radiocarbon into our bodies. But when we die, we stop taking radiocarbon into our bodies. And so a dinosaur dies, it stops taking in radiocarbon, and then over the thousands of years, it's getting less and less radiocarbon. And as I said before, after 90,000 years, there should be no radiocarbon left in dinosaur bones. If every atom of the Earth was radiocarbon, it all would have decayed away in less than 1 million years. So if you already believe the fossils, dinosaur fossils, the coal beds, all those things are millions of years old, you wouldn't expect to find any radiocarbon in them. And yet you do. And this is one of the things that we found when we studied petrified wood like this at different levels in the geologic record. I was doing research on this. I was collecting samples in England, in Australia, and I sent them to the radiocarbon laboratories, and sure enough, they had radiocarbon in them. So this is another aspect of this whole time question, because if these things are believed to be millions of years old, like this petrified wood, and yet it has radiocarbon in it that says it's only thousands of years old, then it means that it calls into question the conventional time frame. And so we wanted to test this because we'd seen in the literature, this is in the conventional literature, in the 1980s they developed a new methodology for measuring radiocarbon. They could count atoms of radiocarbon. That's how good it was. But they wanted to be sure that they weren't getting any contamination in their laboratories. And so they took samples like petrified wood, they took samples of dinosaur bones and coal and oil and natural gas and limestone even, and they put them in their equipment, and every sample they tested had radiocarbon in it. And this was reported in the literature, and they ignored it. So in our research, we decided, well, we'll test that for ourselves. We wanted to be sure that this wasn't an artifact of the conventional experimental method. So we selected samples from 10 different coal beds around the United States, some coal beds that were conventionally as young as 40 million years, some coal beds that were conventionally over 300 million years old. And when we tested them for radiocarbon, they had radiocarbon in them, and they all yielded the same radiocarbon age, which meant that these plants must have all lived at the same time and died at the same time. And that fits the flood paradigm, because these would have been pre-flood trees that were all buried together at the same time. But we went further.
Is Genesis history. Well worth just searching out the videos. They're on YouTube. It's very good information. Dr. Andrew Snelling is a PhD in geology. He's a very clever man, good scientist. And, I'll talk about the RAPE project near the end of the video. So this is the Paleochronological Group Singapore Conference presentation. Now there we've got a comparison of the values of 10 Cretaceous Jurassic dinosaur bones from Texas, Alaska, USA, China and Europe. And a lot of these scientists came from United States, France, from Poland, and they carbon-14 tested dinosaur bones, and they got young ages. They got ages only thousands of years old. Now carbon-14 only dates organic materials up to 60 to 90,000 years. After that there won't be any carbon-14 left. But many dinosaurs have been tested as only thousands of years old. But now the Darwinian fraternity have stopped all further AMS testing. I'll show you that now later. So, banned by the Centre for Applied Isotope Studies. So from 2007 to 2011, the Paleochronology Group had 8 dinosaur bones sampled, carbon tested, and they were dated by the Centre for Applied Isotopic Studies at the University of Georgia, and for good reason. Because the senior research scientist Alexander Cherkinsky, he specialises in the preparation of samples for carbon-14 testing, and he directed the pre-treatment and processing of the dinosaur bone samples with the accelerator mass spectrometer, though he did not know at the time that the bones were from dinosaurs, and he signed the reports. So carbon dating at this facility is certainly the very best. But in 2014, someone told the director of the facility, Jeff Speakman, that the paleochronology group was showing the carbon-14 reports on their website and YouTube and drawing the obvious conclusions, which is dinosaurs are only young. So when he received another bone sample from the paleochronology group, he returned it to the centre and sent an email saying, "I've recently become aware of the work that you and your team have been conducting with respect to radiocarbon dating of bone. The scientists at the CAIS are dismayed by the claims that you and your team have made with respect to the age of the Earth and the validity of biological evolution. Consequently, we are no longer able to provide radiocarbon services in support of your anti-scientific agenda." Well, the only ones that are being anti-scientific here are actually the AMS Lab. "I have instructed the radiocarbon laboratory to return your recent samples and to you and not to accept any future samples for analysis." So there's the email there. And it says, "The scientists of the CAIS and I are dismayed by the claims that you and your team have made with respect to the age of the Earth and the validity of biological evolution. Consequently, we're no longer able to provide radiocarbon services in support of your anti-scientific agenda." Notice that he did not say the radiocarbon report of the dinosaur bone samples were inaccurate. No, his objection was that the paleochronology group was using the reports as evidence that dinosaurs lived thousands, not millions of years ago. So they asked 3 times over 3 weeks, what is the right conclusion to draw from the test results that your laboratory provided us? Then they asked the entire staff. None of them had an answer. It's the threat and control of censorship hangs over everyone. So a manager of a commercial laboratory that does carbon-14 dating, the Beta Analytic Incorporated, reviewed a poster display of the dinosaur data and discussed it with a member of the paleochronology group, and her interest led to propose that her company performed a carbon-14 test on a T-Rex bone that they had acquired, and she wrote back in this email, "Thanks for considering our service for this project. We wish you well in your research, but must choose to opt out of the analysis. Since you identified it as a T-Rex, and these are known to be extinct for 50 million years, it is beyond the limit of our dating. If a recent result was derived, it would be universally challenged with possible risks of poor result claims for our laboratory. This is a project much better suited for collaboration with a university laboratory. Regards, Bernadette." What does that tell you?
Hi, this is Mark Armitage coming to you from my lab where I've been busy working on dinosaur bones and the soft tissues within them. In fact, this is a piece of Triceratops frill that we excavated from the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, and we've been finding lots of soft tissue in this, the bone osteocytes, beautifully preserved down to hundreds of nanometers structure and still soft. In my case, my science took me to soft tissue in a Triceratops horn, and I'm talking stretchy, and I'll show you this here in a second. This is what we mean by an example of soft tissue which was collected from the Triceratops horn in Montana. I'm going to stretch it Look at how stretchy this is. And this is full of bone osteocytes, the tiny cells that make this tissue and then impregnate it with bone mineral. And this was found 1 foot from the surface in Montana in the presence of insects, microbes, rodents, plants, and fungal bodies, and we've recovered the DNA of all of those. So this cannot hang around for millions of years in the presence of all those organisms and oxygen and water. And so this is what we're talking about by soft tissue.
So Dr. Mark Armitage was sacked from a California university by the Darwinian Academia for honestly publishing his work in the prestigious science journal Acta Histochemica. He runs his own lab now. He actually took the university to court and he won the case because he was sacked unfairly, because his work was showing that dinosaurs are only thousands of years old. All accelerator mass spectrometer labs all over the world now refuse to blind test any sample without knowing where it is from. Now this video is an example. It's Mark Armitage again, showing you what the mass spectrometer labs now need to take a sample.
Hi class, we're going to do an exercise today, and this exercise is called, what is the age of my specimen? Now let's say I have a piece of dinosaur bone and I want to send it in, and I forgot to bring one, so I apologize for that. But I want to send it in for radiocarbon dating, and my goal is to find out what is the age of my specimen. Class?
What is the age of my specimen?
Good. So, we want to send it to a radiometric dating lab, and so they ask us to fill out a form. And here I have 7 or 8 forms from different radiocarbon dating laboratories from around the world. You can go online and find these for yourself. It didn't take me long to find them. But here's one from Poland, from Silesian University of Technology. And so this is the submission form that they sent me, and they ask a question about the sample. What is the geographic location, the region and the geographical coordinates, latitude and longitude of where this was found? Then they want to know more context about the sample. They ask for the geomorphological and stratigraphical context. In other words, where was this buried? You might see where we're going here. They want to get an idea of what layers this specimen was found in. And then they ask a very interesting question. They ask, what is the expected age or period of your sample? And so, what are they asking, class?
What is the age of your specimen?
Thank you. They also want to know the answers to other questions, but here's a very interesting one. Are there other existing dates of this site or layer or object like the one you're sending in, and are there references in the literature? Very good, class. So, we have a dinosaur bone, and we want to send it in, and we are asking the question,
what is the age of your specimen?
Okay, so here is the University of Groningen from the Netherlands. And I asked them for a submission form, and they made one available to me, and they asked, what is the stratigraphy of your specimen? What is the prehistorical association? And then they asked, what is the expected age of your specimen? And so what are they asking, class?
What is the age of your specimen?
Very good. And so you see a pattern forming here. Here is another laboratory. This one is in Kiel, Germany. From, and I can't even pronounce this, all of this German terminology, but this is the form that you have to fill out to send in with your specimen. And they're asking, what is the geographical latitude and longitude? What is the sample depth? In other words, they want to know exactly where it's from and what layers it's from. And then on the back side of the page, they ask, what is the estimated age range of your specimen? So what are they asking, class?
What is the age of your specimen?
So I'm asking them, what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
And they're asking me,
what is the age of your specimen?
Isn't this interesting? We're having a great time with this exercise, aren't we, class? Here is from the University of Waikato in New Zealand, the radiocarbon dating lab, and I asked them for a form, and here they sent me one. And so they're asking, are there other radiocarbon dates pertinent to this sample? In other words, they're asking what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
So even before I send it in, they want to know. And then they're asking me here on the back, what is the estimated age range and what is the basis of my estimate? So what are they asking, class?
What is the age of your specimen?
So I'm asking them,
what is the age of your specimen?
And they're asking me,
what is the age of your specimen?
What a fun exercise. Here is from another one. This is the University of Oxford in Oxford, England, and they sent a very detailed form that I have to fill out. They're asking about the sites, where it was found. In fact, they're asking what is the period, the likely age of the sample. In other words, Bronze Age, etc., etc. And this is required. So I'm asking them, what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
And they're asking me,
what is the age of your specimen?
Now notice something very important, class. They're asking me these questions before they do any testing on the sample. Isn't that strange? We thought that all we had to do was send a rock in to a rock lab and they would tell us the age of our specimen. But in fact, they're asking us what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
Very interesting. Now here is a radio chronology lab in Quebec, Canada. And they want to know what's the latitude and the longitude, where you found it. And then they want to know what is the estimated age of the specimen. So I'm asking them what about my specimen?
What is the age of your specimen?
And they in turn are asking me what?
What is the age of your specimen?
Very interesting. Isn't it amazing that every single one of these labs does this? Here's another one from Canada. This is from Ottawa, Canada, the André Lalonde AMS Laboratory. And they want to know environmental details. What was the location, the latitude, the longitude, the burial? And then they ask, what is the approximate age range of your specimen? Under 15,000 years, from 15,000 to 35,000 years, or over 35,000 years? So I'm asking them what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
And they're asking me what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
Over and over. We could do this so much more. I have one from the Geochronology Laboratories at Cambridge, Massachusetts. Same question. What is the estimated age of this sample? What is the basis for this age? Where was it located? And tell us what the estimated age was. Here's one right near me at University of California, Irvine, the Keck Carbon Cycle AMS Laboratory. They ask on the bottom of the page, what is the what is the estimated age of the specimen? And so I'm asking them what class?
What is the age of your specimen?
Well, we've done that enough now that you get the point. The point is that every single radiochronology dating laboratory that I send a specimen to has to be accompanied with a submission form. The submission form requires me to put down what is the estimated age of the specimen, or they will not accept the rock, this bone, whatever it is I'm sending for radiometric dating. I hope that was instructive to you. Thank you, class, and God bless. Hi again.
So what did that tell us? The true science is being deceitfully manipulated. I find Dr. Mark Armitage quite humorous. He was talking there with his secretary. So why do the AMS labs refuse to test samples without knowing their origin and estimated age and exactly, where it's come from? Well, it's because all these labs are run by the Darwinian academia and they do not want to allow a divine foot in the door. They all have nice, prestigious working environments and high salaries, and they do not want to lose their reputations by admitting that their carbon-14 dating methods will reveal that all biological samples, for example dinosaurs or any fossils, are only thousands of years old. They need to uphold that myth of evolution by promoting the fallacy of billions, millions of years required by the theory. Their funding comes from the limitless evolutionary vault. Now, these are published articles in secular scientific peer-reviewed journals. So these are from evolutionists, and they're detailing the presence of biological soft tissue in assumed millions of years old creatures and plants that can only be thousands of years old. I'm going to scroll the list now. Now on the left there we've got what the specimen is. We've got the people who did the paper, the scientific paper. And on the right there is the actual link on the internet that you can go to and have a look at this paper yourself. All you have to do is put into Google Docs dinosaur soft original tissue or list of biometrical fossil papers. Now all those papers there, there's 116 on this one, but there's a lot more now because I downloaded this quite some time ago. You can go and have a look at this yourself. So to secular scientists, the geologic column represents millions of years. Yet we find in nearly every layer original tissue in fossils that refutes millions of year ages. Original tissue throughout the fossil record. There's an example: soft frog intact with bloody bone marrow, supposed to be 10 million years. Keratin in a Madagascar Cretaceous bird, 65 million years. And we go down the column. So mosasaur blood, retina pigments, supposed to be 65 to 68 million years old. How do retina pigments last 65 million years? They can't. There's collagen fibrils, supposed to be 125 million years in the Triassic column. And then we go again down the column. We have Archaeopteryx, original biological material, supposed to be 150 million years. Right at the bottom in the Precambrian, chitin fibers in tube worms, supposed to be 551 million years old. It doesn't make sense. All these things have been found, and so the carbon-14 dating, which they're refusing to do because they know it will destroy the evolutionary theory. In our education systems and in the media, radiometric dating is promoted as a very reliable scientific method used to analyze the age of the Earth. And consequently, millions of people think that all the scientists know the exact age of everything on this Earth. They state that the Earth is 4.5 to 4.7 billions of years old. Dinosaurs and the early ancestors of man are also millions of years old. Our children are taught this in schools, colleges, and the universities as fact. Unfortunately, as you've just seen with carbon-14 dating, the biological tissues throughout the geological column, this is all based on very erroneous assumptions and a prior commitment to promote the evolutionary, because it's necessary, the time. They need long time scale for evolution, but it's not there. So the dating methods of carbon-based, mostly biological materials, carbon-14 and nitrogen-14. Carbon-14 can only be used on samples less than 50 to 90,000 years old, and after that no carbon will be evident. Now, the most common dating methods for used for the assumed millions and billions of years are potassium argon, rubidium strontium, uranium to lead, samarium to neodymium. Now let's have a look at some of the anomalies with these long age methods of dating. So the widely held belief that scientists can accurately date the Earth using radioisotopes, it's not factual, and the science is seriously inconsistent, and even lots of evolutionists agree with this. So let's talk about dating of rocks of known age. So here are examples of the rocks that we know the age of. So there's Mount St. Helens, 1980. So that was erupted in 1980, and yet it's been dated as 0.35 to 2.8 millions of years. There's a one in Hawaii. We knew it actually, erupted in 1800. That's been dated to 160 to 3,300 million years. All of these rock samples that have been dated as millions of years old by accelerator mass spectrometer labs are less than 250 years old. So if we can't actually date rocks of known age, how can we date rocks that we don't know the age of? So here's inconsistencies in the Grand Canyon rock samples using different dating criteria. So different dating methods should all agree with a specific age, but they don't. So here's an example. The Cardenas basalt lava. So the potassium argon age dating was 516 million years. The rubidium strontium was dated at 1,111 million years. And the samarium neodymium was dated at 1,588 million years. These should all agree. So what's the correct age for this rock? None of the above. These samples were sent to many different labs for blind testing, and the labs at the time did not know where the origin of the samples came from. And this was all done by the RATE project research from 2003 to 2014. Here's another one, the Brahma aphibolite. So you can see there, different ages, they should all agree, but they don't. There's another one, the Base Rapids diabysil. They don't agree. Totally different ages for all the different methods of dating. Accelerator mass spectrometer labs all over the world now refuse to do blind sample testing any longer because they don't like their reputations being compromised. The RATE project PhD scientists, and these are clever men, they're very good scientists and they're honest scientists. They spent 11 years and over $2 million on researching and challenging the secular scientific assumptions relating to the radiometric dating of the Earth. They've done lots of scientific papers, they've written books, they've written loads of articles. Their research supports very strong evidence of an Earth that was destroyed, unfortunately, by a global catastrophic flood only thousands of years ago. And to date, the RATE project research has not been refuted in any scientific journal to date. It's had lots of criticism, lots of YouTube warriors, pulling it all apart, but no scientific papers have actually refuted the scientific journal to date. Carbon-14 research by many honest scientists have revealed and empirically, that's observed and tested and validated, that carbon-14 is in all dinosaurs, it's in all coal that's tested, all fossils, and even in diamonds. That is, those that have been allowed to be tested. This is Dr. Robert V. Gentry. He did a lot of good research, especially on zircon crystals, which contain helium, and Helium is a very leaky gas. It's very thin and it leaks out of things, but there's still helium in zircon crystals, which should not be there. Helium leakage rates in zircon crystals equates to only thousands of years. He also did a lot of research on polonium halos, and if you want to see anything about this, you can go to www.halos.com. And 40 years of unrefuted polonium halos research, which is now totally ignored, which shows the Earth is not millions of years old. I've only just scratched the surface of the skullduggery and the manipulation of the AMS laboratories. There are many honest, genuine scientists who are trying very hard to expose the misleading practices of the evolutionary fraternity. However, they're up against a brick wall. Is it any wonder that the general population of the educated world has no idea of the real truth that all fossils are only about 4,400 years old, because they all died in a global flood? In 1 Timothy chapter 6 in the New Living Translation, it says, "Timothy, guard what God has entrusted to you. Avoid godless, foolish discussions with those who oppose you with their so-called knowledge." And in the King James Version, that says science, falsely so called. I'm going to end this video now with a simplified explanation of the radiometric dating assumptions.
Nearly every textbook and science magazine teaches that the Earth is billions of years old, and the primary dating method used for determining this is what is called radioisotope dating, or radiometric dating. Now, this is a reliable method for measuring absolute ages of rocks and the age of the Earth, right? First off, many scientists now regard the age of the Earth to be between 4.55 and 4.6 billion years old. Okay, so if this method is reliable and accurate, why the 50 million year discrepancy? That seems like a lot. But let's get into some details here and see what's going on. Keep in mind that there's all kinds of scientific jargon on this topic, and so we'll just present a very straightforward, simplified version of the process. Radiometric dating is the process of estimating the ages of rocks based on the decay of radioactive elements in them. Basically, there are certain kinds of atoms in nature that are unstable and spontaneously decay into other kinds of atoms. For instance, uranium will radioactively decay through a series of steps until it becomes the stable element called lead. The original element is called the parent element, and the end result is called the daughter element. Radioisotope dating is commonly used to date igneous rocks, rocks which formed when hot molten material cooled and solidified. The dating clock started when the rock cooled. During the molten state, it is assumed that the intense heat forced any gaseous daughter elements to escape. It is assumed that once the rock cooled, no more atoms escaped, and any daughter element now found in the rock is a result of radioactive decay since that rock formed. The decay rate is measured in terms of half-life, that is, the length of time it takes half of the remaining atoms of a radioactive parent element to decay. Now, of course, that can be measured in a laboratory, and it is assumed that since we know the decay rate, we can calculate backwards and come up with the age of the rock. But is that all there is to it? Here's where it gets tricky. It's true we can measure a decay rate using observational science, but there's another kind of science that is required to accurately calculate dates for rocks, and that is what we call historical science. Historical science deals with the things in the past, and therefore it cannot be repeated and tested. Dating methods require both types of science, because in order to get accurate rock dates, one would have to accurately know both the decay rate and the initial conditions of the rock sample, right? Since radioisotope dating uses both types of science, we can't directly measure the ages of rocks. There are assumptions involved. For instance, how do we know what the initial conditions were in the rock sample? How do we know the amounts of parent or daughter elements now in that sample haven't been altered by other processes in the past? How does someone know the decay rate has remained constant since the rock formed? The answer is they don't. Let's simplify here and talk about a typical hourglass. Let's say you walk into a room and you see an hourglass with sand at the top and sand at the bottom, and some sand sprinkling from the top chamber to the bottom. Well, observational science would allow us to see and measure the sand, and then calculate how long the hourglass has been running, right? We could make our sand measurements and then calculate when the hourglass was turned over, right? Well, those calculations could be wrong, because we may have failed to consider some major assumptions, like, was there any sand at the bottom when the hourglass was turned over? Has any sand been added or taken out of the hourglass? Has the sand always been falling at a constant rate? Since we did not observe the initial conditions when the hourglass started, and we haven't been watching the sand all the time since then, we must make assumptions. All three of those assumptions can affect our time calculations. Now, of course, there's more to understanding all of this, but enough said.
Yeah, enough said. So thanks for watching, and I could have done this video for a couple of hours because there's so much more information out there, but I'll end it here. So I'll say bye for now. Thank you.